The moment I opened the email and realized my name wasn't on the final $6.5 million proposal, I felt the ground shift beneath me. I had poured half a year of my life into that project. Early mornings, sleepless nights, dozens of client calls, hundreds of edits, I lived and breathed that proposal. It was more than work to me. It was personal. But somehow, in the version the team sent to the client, my contributions were invisible. No mention. Not even a footnote. Just silence. When I confronted Martin, our team lead, he barely looked up from his laptop. "We thought it would be simpler this way. You're more of a support person anyway," he said casually, like it wasn't my blood, sweat, and expertise that had crafted the backbone of that entire strategy. Support? I was the architect of the entire financial structure. I ran simulations, negotiated terms with suppliers, handled all the logistics with the client's procurement team, and yet here I was, being sidelined without even the courtesy of a conversation. I walked back to my desk in a daze, replaying every meeting, every document, every late-night fix I had made. I wasn't angry yet. I was too stunned. But when the anger came, it was white-hot. I didn't yell. I didn't slam any doors. But I started compiling. Every message. Every revision. Every decision I led. My digital paper trail was impeccable, and I made sure it was organized and time-stamped. If they were going to erase me, they were going to regret it. 3 days later, the client requested a final walkthrough presentation before signing. I wasn't invited. Martin and 2 others prepped the slides, rehearsed in the conference room, and made smug jokes just loud enough for me to hear. "Let's just hope she doesn't barge in," one whispered. They didn't know I'd already spoken to the client weeks before, establishing rapport, answering technical questions, easing their worries. I knew what they valued. And I had a gut feeling they hadn't forgotten me. The presentation day arrived, and I waited. Not at the table, not on the call, but I was watching from a side screen. The team started confidently. Buzzwords. Pie charts. Overpromises. And then the client's lead rep, Mr. Langford, leaned forward. "Sorry to interrupt. Where's Sarah?" Martin blinked. "Sarah?" "Yes. The analyst who walked us through the operational risk model. The one who understood the regional supply chain better than any of us." "Is she no longer with your team?" Silence. She's on other projects now," Martin stammered. Langford didn't smile. "That's unfortunate. She was the reason we felt confident moving forward. We'd like her in the room." Martin fumbled for excuses, but it was too late. I got the call 5 minutes later. "Sarah, can you join us in conference, eh?" I walked in calmly, but inside, I was trembling. This was my moment. I greeted the client, nodded at my stunned team, and took control of the room. I answered Langford's concerns, corrected a few technical inaccuracies the others had made, and when we concluded, he smiled. Now we're back on track. The contract was signed that afternoon. But Langford had one last condition: we want Sarah as our point of contact going forward. Martin couldn't argue. That night, my inbox exploded with congratulations from leadership, from departments who hadn't even been involved, and from clients on adjacent projects. But I didn't forget the silence from my own team. No apology. No explanation. So I sent an email. A simple one. With receipts. I CC'd HR and our regional director, attaching every document showing my role and impact. Then I wrote, just for the record, here's what support looks like. The fallout was swift. Martin was placed under review. The others who had backed the exclusion suddenly wanted to be friendly. I remained polite, but distant. A week later, I was invited to present the same proposal at a global leadership summit. Not Martin. Not the rest. Just me. As I stood on that stage, recounting our $6.5 million turnaround, I realized something. They tried to erase me from the story. But they forgot, I was the one who wrote it. And no one forgets the author. The moment I opened the email and realized my name wasn't on the final $6.5 million proposal, I felt the ground shift beneath me. I had poured half a year of my life into that project. Early mornings, sleepless nights, dozens of client calls, hundreds of edits, I lived and breathed that proposal. It was more than work to me. It was personal. But somehow, in the version the team sent to the client, my contributions were invisible. No mention. Not even a footnote. Just silence. When I confronted Martin, our team lead, he barely looked up from his laptop. We thought it would be simpler this way. You're more of a support person anyway, he said casually, like it wasn't my blood, sweat, and expertise that had crafted the backbone of that entire strategy. Support? I was the architect of the entire financial structure. I ran simulations, negotiated terms with suppliers, handled all the logistics with the client's procurement team, and yet here I was, being sidelined without even the courtesy of a conversation. I walked back to my desk in a daze, replaying every meeting, every document, every late-night fix I had made. I wasn't angry yet. I was too stunned. But when the anger came, it was white-hot. I didn't yell. I didn't slam any doors. But I started compiling. Every message. Every revision. Every decision I led. My digital paper trail was impeccable, and I made sure it was organized and time-stamped. If they were going to erase me, they were going to regret it. 3 days later, the client requested a final walkthrough presentation before signing. I wasn't invited. Martin and 2 others prepped the slide. Her tone shifted. They're trying to schedule a new kickoff next week. But I'm telling you now, Greystone doesn't move forward without you. I was stunned. I never expected them to take a side, let alone mine. But Liz made her stance crystal clear: if I wasn't involved, the deal was dead. She copied me on an email to Halston's executive team later that day. In light of Sarah's departure, we are putting the contract on hold until further notice. The panic at Halston must have been nuclear. Within hours, a senior VP, who had never spoken to me directly before, reached out to Miranda asking if I'd be open to discussion. Suddenly they wanted to clarify the terms of departure. Translation: they were backpedaling. Fast. But I wasn't interested in vague apologies or offers of silence money. I wanted accountability. The following week, Miranda scheduled a formal mediation session. She laid out every receipt we had, emails showing my leadership on the project, edits made to remove my contributions, and proof that Andrew had presented my work as his own. The company's legal rep sat pale-faced across the table. When Miranda produced a dated project timeline, annotated with my detailed notes and timestamps, there was no arguing. Then came the email from Greystone. During the mediation, Liz sent a formal statement reiterating that the project would not proceed unless I was reinstated in a leadership role. She even hinted at legal concerns regarding the sudden shift in personnel and transparency violations. The tide had turned. 2 days later, Halston's executive board requested a meeting, not with Miranda, but with me. I agreed. We met at a neutral location downtown, and for the first time in 14 years, I didn't walk in as an employee. I walked in as a force. Their tone was apologetic, almost desperate. They claimed Andrew had acted outside of protocol, that they were unaware of the full picture. They offered me my position back, plus a promotion and a raise. They even floated a public statement to clarify the misunderstanding. I leaned back in my chair and said, "The only statement I'm interested in is one that acknowledges who saved that contract and who tried to bury it." There was silence. They knew I had the upper hand. That night, I met with Miranda and we discussed terms. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to go back, but I knew this wasn't about one job. It was about setting a precedent. I told her I wanted a full written apology, a severance package 3 times the standard, and a non-disparagement clause that applied to them, not me. The next day, they agreed to every demand. By the time the dust settled, Andrew had been quietly reassigned. The internal memo painted it as a strategic transition. But word got out quickly. Staff started calling me the quiet storm behind his downfall. People I hadn't heard from in years reached out to say thank you. "You took a stand for all of us," one email read. Finally, someone showed they couldn't just erase the people who actually do the work. I didn't return to Halston. I took the severance and launched my own consulting firm. Within a month, Greystone became my first official client, this time, directly under my name. They tried to fire me. But all they did was free me. Launching my consulting firm wasn't just a career pivot, it was my rebirth. I named it Veritas Strategies, a nod to truth, transparency, and the thing Halston Tech Solutions had so blatantly tried to bury. I poured every ounce of energy into getting it right. I didn't want to just succeed, I wanted to build something that made companies think twice before sidelining their best people. The week Greystone signed on as my first official client, I knew I was onto something. They didn't hesitate. Liz told me flat out, "You're the only one we trust with our infrastructure modernization." The irony wasn't lost on me. Halston lost a $2.1 million contract, and I gained a lifelong client, all because they tried to erase my name. I rented a small office space in a co-working hub and hired my first assistant, Tasha, a whip-smart operations graduate who'd also been laid off by a former employer in a suspicious restructuring. We bonded instantly. "They tried to disappear me," she told me during our interview. I looked her in the eye and said, "That's exactly the kind of person I want on this team." By month 2, I was managing 3 projects simultaneously: Greystone's transition, a new pitch for a Canadian fintech firm, and a strategic overhaul for a struggling logistics startup in Austin. Word spread fast. Some of my old Halston colleagues reached out discreetly. They wanted to leave. They wanted in. "Sarah, you built that place," one of them texted me late one night. "Without you, the soul's gone." It stung a little, reading that. I had put more than a decade into Halston. Built systems. Mentored teams. Fought tooth and nail to turn failing departments around. But now I saw how fragile loyalty was when leadership treated people like parts instead of partners. Still, I stayed focused on my new mission. Then, something unexpected happened. A junior exec from Halston, Jamie, someone I had mentored when she first joined, reached out through LinkedIn. "I know I probably shouldn't be contacting you," her message read. "But I think you should see this." Attached was a screenshot from an internal Halston thread. Andrew's replacement was apparently struggling to manage the fallout of my departure. Deadlines were slipping. The Greystone gap had turned into a massive loss, and now the board was asking questions. But what caught my eye was a line from the CEO himself: "I want this Sarah situation contained. No more stories, no more noise. Make it go away." I stared at the message for a long time. It was more than just corporate panic, it was evidence that they were still trying to silence me. Even after the settlement. Even after they'd lost. I called Miranda. "This could be breach of the agreement," she said calmly. "Especially if they're using internal resources to discredit you or interfere with your business. Do you want to go public?" I hesitated. The truth was, I had been considering it. I'd been journaling the whole experience, and some colleagues encouraged me to write a LinkedIn article about it. Tell the story, they said. People need to know what happens behind closed doors. But going public would mean war. And I wasn't sure I was ready until the next day, when an anonymous Twitter account posted a thread accusing Veritas Strategies of being built on stolen IP from Halston. The timing wasn't coincidental. The claims were vague and unsubstantiated, but damaging enough to make a dent in perception. The gloves were off. I traced the account back to a burner created just 72 hours earlier. With Miranda's help and a tech investigator, we were able to track its activity to an IP address linked to Halston's headquarters. I had them. Again. But this time, I didn't go to Halston's legal team. I went to the press. A mid-tier tech publication picked up the story. Exec fired after securing $2.1 million deal, launches consultancy, then gets targeted in coordinated smear campaign. The article quoted anonymous insiders, including Jamie, who confirmed everything from internal sabotage to systemic retaliation against high-performing women at Halston. The piece went viral within the industry. My inbox exploded with messages, people thanking me for speaking out, sharing their own horror stories. HR professionals reached out asking to collaborate. VCs emailed offering to fund my expansion. Halston tried to issue a response, but it backfired. Their statement was corporate fluff, and the online community shredded it. Suddenly, I wasn't just a former employee, I was a symbol. A case study in standing your ground. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just reclaiming my name. I was building a movement. The article had done more than just generate buzz, it had ignited a wildfire. Within a week, I was invited to speak at a virtual panel on workplace equity, and 3 podcasts reached out to have me on as a guest. I wasn't chasing any of it, but momentum had its own gravity now. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was fighting to survive, I was leading. Halston, on the other hand, was imploding under the weight of its own deception. Several employees resigned after the story broke. One even publicly posted her resignation letter, calling the leadership a cautionary tale of what happens when ego overrides ethics. Clients took notice. Rumors swirled about at least 2 enterprise accounts pulling out. Through back channels, I heard that Andrew had been asked to take a sabbatical, which everyone knew was corporate speak for getting quietly pushed out. I felt a pang of vindication, but also a strange hollowness. I never wanted destruction. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted decency. But they had made their choices. And now, the consequences were simply catching up. Miranda kept me grounded. She reminded me that while the defamation attempt had failed, Halston's breach of our settlement agreement wasn't something to let slide. We prepared a secondary claim, this time with punitive damages attached. The threat alone was enough to send shockwaves through Halston's boardroom. Their general counsel requested a call to resolve this matter without escalation. I agreed to the meeting, but on one condition: it would be recorded and transcribed. The day of the meeting, I sat in my modest but sunlit office, flanked by Miranda and Tasha. Across the Zoom screen were 3 Halston execs, including a visibly rattled CEO and their legal representative. Andrew, notably, was not present. "We want to apologize for any unintended harm," the CEO began, reading from what was clearly a prepared statement. "It was never our intention to discredit your professional contributions or interfere with your new business." I leaned forward, unblinking. "Then explain the fake Twitter account. The internal memo telling staff to contain me. The unauthorized access to proposal files that were never yours to begin with." Silence. "We acknowledge there were lapses in judgment," their legal rep said weakly. "No," I said firmly. You exploited my work, then tried to erase me. Then, when I rebuilt, you came after me again. This isn't a lapse. It's a pattern. The tension hung thick. Miranda slid a document into the shared screen, our terms for resolution, full public retraction, damages, and a non-compete clause that barred Halston from contacting any of my current clients for 2 years. They tried to negotiate. They offered hush money. But we didn't budge. By the end of the call, they reluctantly agreed to every item. The retraction went live that Friday, issued as a formal apology posted on Halston's corporate site and social platforms. It wasn't just an admission, it was an exoneration. And when industry blogs picked it up, the narrative solidified. I had won. But even as the dust began to settle, something more powerful was taking shape beneath it all. I began receiving inquiries from professionals, particularly women and people of color, who had been pushed out of roles they'd excelled in, just like I had. Some were thinking of launching their own firms. Others just wanted to be heard. So, I expanded Veritas's mission. We weren't just a consultancy anymore, we were an incubator. A safe haven for displaced talent. We launched a pilot program called Phoenix Circle, offering mentoring, legal guidance, and startup grants to professionals rebuilding after toxic exits. Within 2 months, we had 50 applicants and 5 sponsors. And just when I thought things couldn't get more full circle, I received an email from Liz at Greystone. Hey Sarah, crazy update. The COO at Halston reached out last week trying to poach our business back. Claimed you were overcommit. I shut it down immediately. Figured you'd want to know. I laughed out loud when I read it. Not in pettiness, but in relief. They still hadn't learned. They still thought power meant manipulation. But I had moved on to something real. Something lasting. I thanked Liz, and then did something I never thought I'd do. I closed the Halston folder on my drive. Archived it. Sealed it. Because they no longer held a place in my mind, or my future. A year later, Veritas had grown to a staff of 15 and a portfolio of clients across 3 countries. We weren't the biggest. We didn't have Flash or Silicon Valley investors. But we had integrity. We had results. And most of all, we had each other's backs. I spoke at conferences, mentored young consultants, and even got invited to deliver a keynote at my alma mater's business school. The theme? Value that can't be erased. Standing on that stage, I thought back to that moment in HR when I'd been told I was no longer needed. And I smiled. Because I'd learned something Halston never understood. The people who build your success are the ones you should never discard. Because when they rise again, they build something stronger. And this time, it's theirs. After the public apology from Halston, things didn't immediately quiet down. In fact, the attention surged. Industry insiders started sharing my story across LinkedIn, business newsletters, and private Slack groups. What started as a cautionary tale became a symbol of professional accountability and silent resilience finally speaking up. Within the week, 2 more former Halston employees reached out to me privately, one a product manager who had quietly been pushed out after flagging major security issues, and the other a designer whose portfolio was stolen by a new VP. Both stories echoed the same culture of silencing and scapegoating. And both said the same thing: I wish I had done what you did. That phrase haunted me. Because for a long time, I hadn't done anything either. I'd waited. I'd hoped it would get better. I'd convinced myself that loyalty would be rewarded. But Halston had taught me a brutal lesson: companies don't remember loyalty, they remember leverage. So, I turned the attention into momentum. I formalized Veritas's internal framework, launched a website that not only showcased our consulting services but also offered resources for professionals recovering from toxic job exits. Articles on documenting your contributions. Guides on building a legal case without burning bridges. Even a confidence rebuilder toolkit with steps to re-establish your value in your own eyes before pitching it to the world again. I hired 2 of those former Halston employees. Not because they reached out, but because they still believed in doing good work in good faith. One took over branding for Veritas, and the other built a bulletproof knowledge base that reduced client onboarding time by 40%. Within a month, their efforts paid off, helping us land a deal with an edtech company in Finland looking to expand its footprint in the US. Meanwhile, Halston was bleeding. Their stock dropped slightly, not catastrophic, but enough to stir whispers. Internal morale was at an all-time low. A former colleague told me their Friday wins meetings had turned into damage control reviews. The company even issued new HR protocols about ownership clarity and began a PR campaign about fostering internal transparency. The irony didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, as I reviewed new pitches with my team, I received a legal follow-up. Halston had tried to quietly update their internal wiki, removing my name from archived projects, including the $2.1 million Greystone contract. I laughed bitterly. They still hadn't learned. Even after the apology, even after the legal pressure, they couldn't help but try to revise history. So we struck back, again. Miranda filed a digital preservation request, forcing Halston to keep all internal archives intact and unedited. The request went public, leaked by someone inside the company who still supported me. That one post, just a screenshot of the preservation order, went viral on Twitter. The caption? "You can't erase what's documented." That single tweet generated a second wave of exposure. Suddenly, my name was being brought up in articles about whistleblower protection, ethical leadership, and women in tech. A professor from Stanford even reached out to ask if she could use my story in a business ethics course. My initial instinct was to say no. It still felt too personal, but Miranda encouraged me. "This isn't just your past," she said. "It's a playbook for others." And she was right. We licensed a case study version of my experience, stripped of legal specifics, to several institutions. Soon after, inquiries from high potential clients increased. They didn't just want someone smart. They wanted someone principled. And that, finally, felt like justice. As the second quarter began, Veritas wasn't just surviving, we were thriving. We were advising 3 major clients across tech, health, and education sectors, and had quietly launched an accelerator program for consultants who wanted to go independent. We called it Ground Zero, not because people were starting from nothing, but because they were rebuilding from what had been unfairly taken from them. The first cohort had 6 people, each with a story. A marketing strategist who'd been replaced by a younger, cheaper intern. A logistics planner whose algorithm saved millions but was credited to a director instead. A finance analyst who had trained her male replacement only to be laid off afterward. I mentored them personally. And as they grew, I grew. One night, after a long call with a client in Dubai, I got an email that made me sit straight up. It was from the Greystone COO, Liz, the same executive I'd saved the deal with. She wrote, "Just wanted to loop you in, Halston made a backdoor approach last week. Tried to undercut your pricing and claim stability issues with Veritas. Don't worry, we shut it down. But thought you'd want to know." That hit me harder than expected. Not because I was surprised Halston tried, but because Liz didn't even hesitate to defend us. That was loyalty. That was earned trust. I wrote back, thanking her and reaffirming our commitment. Then I poured myself a drink and stood on my balcony, looking out over the city skyline. A thought came over me, I had everything Halston claimed to offer: reputation, results, leadership. Only now, it was real. As summer rolled around, I attended my first industry conference since launching Veritas. I was asked to speak on a panel titled From Fallout to Fortune. I almost said no. I didn't want my entire story to revolve around being fired. But then I remembered what Miranda said. Your story isn't your scar, it's your superpower. So I walked on stage in front of 600 people and told the truth. Not just the firing. Not just the emails. But the slow erosion of being unseen. The gaslighting. The silence in meetings. The feeling of disappearing while still being right there. And then, how I rebuilt. Not alone. But with help. With intention. With proof. The standing ovation stunned me. So did the line of people afterward, some crying, others silent, holding my hand like I'd just given them oxygen. I realized then that I wasn't just running a business anymore. I was holding space for people who'd been erased, giving them a blueprint to reclaim their power. By the end of the year, Veritas had a waiting list of clients and a media feature in Forbes. But the moment that meant the most? A handwritten note from a junior consultant in our accelerator. It read, "You reminded me I'm not crazy. I'm not broken. I'm just not done yet." I taped it to my office wall. Because some victories don't come with fireworks. They come with silence. With dignity. With the knowledge that when you're truly seen, you don't need to scream. You just lead. And others follow. A year after I walked out of Halston's glass-paneled office with a cardboard box in my hands, I stood on the main stage of the Global Leadership Summit in Chicago, wearing a microphone and looking out at a sea of professionals, founders, and students. I wasn't here as someone who had been fired. I was here as someone who had built something better. Stronger. My keynote was titled Unstealable Value. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't nervous. Because this was mine. My story. My voice. My stage. When I stepped off, dozens of people came up, some wanting advice, others just wanting to say thank you. One woman, a soft-spoken analyst from DC, said quietly, "I stayed at a place that broke me for too long. Your story helped me quit and finally believe in myself again." I hugged her and said, "You didn't quit. You reclaimed." That was the power Halston never understood. They thought power was control. But real power is credibility, integrity, memory. And I had all three. Back at Veritas, we had grown to a team of 20. Not huge. But every single person had been hired with purpose. Not because of pedigree or resume polish, but because they'd been underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked somewhere else, and still rose. We called ourselves the proof. Because that's what we were.